Daniel Napod. How can we miss with that? It's just a terrific combination. So today I'm talking about one of the principles that is very fundamental to our belief system. We believe in the eternal goodness of life. It's one of the deep principles of religious science as suggested by Ernest Holmes. We believe in the eternal goodness of life. And, you know, with all of the things that seem to be coming up in this time for us, we can be upset and think and talk about, oh my gosh, what in the world is going on? What's happening here? And the truth of the matter is that it's all in divine right order, and it is the eternal goodness that is bubbling up. I think of it as very similar to a foreign body or a germ or something that is in our human body, and it must come to the surface to be excised. So it's like a boil or a pimple that has to come to a head. And all of the difficulties that we are seeing in our environment, in our country, is like that. We have to take a look at it. It has to come to the surface for us to examine. But that is the eternal goodness of life coming to the surface. And Ernest Holmes talks about a body within a body. So these difficulties are like the grander body and the grander physical manifestation of the goodness of life. There was a story that I just want to share with you about a Cincinnati policeman who was sitting in his patrol car, and his name was James Given, Cincinnati Police Sergeant James Given, who was sitting in his patrol car, and he heard this tap, 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 tap on his patrol car, the door of it. And he was eating his bagel and taking a little break. And he looked out, and there was a goose tapping on his door of the patrol car. And so he took some of his bagel that he was eating, and he tossed it out and thought that the goose was hungry. And she wasn't. He went back to eating and ignored her, sort of, and she came once more and tapping on the door. And then she walked away from the car, and she stopped and kind of looked back at him like, are you coming or what? So he thought it was odd, and he got out of his patrol car and he followed her. And she took him a little bit away near a body of water, and there was a little gosling. He said that the gosling was tied up in a rope. And he called the SPCA for help because he was afraid that the goose would attack him if he got too close to the gosling. Well, the SPCA didn't have anybody to send to rescue a gosling. So then he called for backup. And the backup did come. It was Officer Cecilia Sharon. And she then untangled the gosling. And James Given kept his distance for fear that the goose was going to attack. Well, she untangled the gosling, and it went running back to its mom, and the mom sort of turned almost as if to say, "Thank you very much for the help." Well, it was a string from a Mother's Day balloon, and I thought that was very interesting, actually, that our officer, James, thought at first it was a rope, and then he was afraid to release the gosling for fear that the goose would attack him. And sometimes, don't you think that that's the truth for all of us? We maybe don't step up for fear. Fear of what? Retribution, fear of embarrassment. There are so many things that we can be afraid of. But coming back to the place of believing in the eternal goodness of all life. Here's something that Ernest Holmes wrote that I want to share with you. And he wrote this in Creative Mind and Success. The first thing to do, then, is to realize that life is your friend and companion. Feel the divine companionship. Feel that you are one with all of life. Declare that. As this thought awakens within your mind, so does it awaken within the mind of all of humanity. Love the world and everyone who is in it. Include all. He continues. The world loves love. Embody it. See the good in all people. Let go of all else. People will feel your love and be drawn into it. Love is the greatest power of the universe. It is the base of all else. It is the cause of all that is. Feel your love to be like a great light, lighting the path of the whole world. Now, we always are at a choice. We always can believe in that we name as fearful. Or we can believe in the eternal goodness of all life. It's our choice. We always can see what is good, or we can see what is fearful. It's how we interpret our lives and the world. There was a story on NPR, National Public Radio, that I was just struck with. And I'm going to share it with you. It was in Washington, D.C., and 8 people had gathered together outside in the summertime to celebrate their friendship and to celebrate a restaurant that one of the women had opened. It was just kind of one of those magical nights. They could hear the crickets and the cicadas. They could see the lightning bugs. The moon was full. It was a beautiful, magical night for friends to be gathered together. And suddenly, there was this huge, long-barreled gun that stepped into that circle of friendships. And a very angry man demanded their money, using expletives and anger and rage. And you can imagine what he was saying. They were terrified. And then they started sort of trying to shame him. What would your mother say? What is wrong with you? And he just became more and more and more agitated. Now, the ironic part of it is that they had no money. All of these 8 people gathered together in celebration had no money. And so they said, look, here, we have no money. there's nothing here. And he became more and more agitated until finally the woman whose home it was, Christina, said, "Here, have a glass of French wine." And they said that the change was amazing. He took the wine and he said, "Oh, that's some kind of good wine." And they said, "Well, here, sit down and have another glass of wine. There's some cheese if you're hungry, some snacks, hors d'oeuvres." And so he sat down. He ultimately put the gun away. And he muttered that, "Well, I obviously have come to the wrong place." They shared wine. They ate their appetizers together. And he got up and he said, "Can I have a hug?" So Christina hugged him and a couple of others hugged him. And then he said, "Can we have a group hug?" And so they all grouped together and had a group hug. And then he took his wine glass and he left. They were dazzled by that. Now, communication scientists have an explanation for that. And it's called complementary conversation. So complementary conversation is when we mirror other people's attitude, behavior, and conversation. So, for instance, you walk into a room and you feel the mood, right? And you sort of join in. Now, if people are judging and criticizing and gossiping, you step into that and you mirror it. That's what we seem to have a tendency to do. Anger begets anger. Love begets love. We mirror what we come in contact with. But Christina practiced non-complimentary behavior. She matched the intruder's anger with generosity, and it shifted it all around. It causes a balance to be disrupted. It's the same principle that Martin Luther King and Gandhi practiced, non-complimentary behavior. A couple can have an argument. I don't know about you, but I've engaged in these sorts of things. And one of the partners says rude, judgmental things, and it's matched by more rude, judgmental conversation. And one goes stomping off, and the other thinks, I am never going to apologize for that. If she thinks that's going to happen, then, hell will freeze over before I apologize. But what can shift it around? So, for instance, a couple is having a conversation and an argument about who's going to do the laundry or who's going to clean the kitchen. There's always a choice. The laundry cannot get done, or the kitchen can't be cleaned. Or, in non-complimentary conversation, a loving partner will do the laundry. clean the kitchen, perhaps bring flowers and some fresh wine. So when that angry partner comes home, to discover that the laundry is done, the bed is made, there's flowers, it shifts it all around. It takes the courageous one to have non-complimentary conversation, to be the change, to take a different point of view. There's a town in Denmark who has met the problem with young Muslims who are being radicalized. Rather than arresting them, rather than calling them out, watching them, expecting them to misbehave, they assign each one of those young people who are threatened into radicalization a mentor. And so the mentor meets with the young person, says, what do you need? How can we help you? So the mentor and all of the police and the judicial system steps forward to wrap this radicalized young person in a protective cocoon to give he or she what they need: a job, self-respect, integration within the community as a whole. And there are numbers and facts and figures to demonstrate that this approach has been very helpful, and they've only lost one of those young people since they started this practice of non-complimentary communication. So what does that mean to each one of us? What does that mean to you and me in celebrating the eternal goodness of all life? Well, for me, it means that I take a broader view. And I trust that all of the stuff that's going on in our country is coming up for our examination and for our reevaluation. For me, it is taking a look with a broader view, knowing that spirit is in action, and there is nothing that I need to fear. Trusting that all things are showing up in divine right order. Ernest Holmes says, and I really fully agree with this, show me a man who is against nothing and for something. So I can be for eternal goodness of all life. I can know and appreciate that what I see percolating up in my community, in my country, is percolating up for me personally to take a look at. To know that there is a lesson there. There's something that I need to see. And there's something that I need to clear up within myself, or it wouldn't be showing up. You know, the great master teacher, Jesus, said it this way: turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek is non-complimentary communication. I can make a choice to meet anger with love. To meet prejudice with inclusiveness. It's my choice. And so it is each one of us. And it is, to me, divine guidance. Something is happening in this country right here, right now. And it is beautiful. There's nothing that I need to fear. There's only trust in the divine goodness of our life. So I would encourage you this week to take a practice of that, to step back and ask yourself, what is the non-complimentary behavior that I need to adapt here? What is the opposite of what I maybe would respond to? You know, the phrase that is very metaphysical, and that is, if we keep doing what we do, we keep getting what we got. So this is also non-complimentary communication. Let's stop doing what we've been doing so that we have room and opportunity and breath to get what we want. That's what we've been teaching in this philosophy forever. Sometimes I need to practice it more. But here's what I do know. I love each one of you deeply and fully. And look at the eternal goodness that shows up right here in this place. So I love each one of you. Namaste. So I would invite the practitioners to stand and hold the consciousness with me. I permit myself to turn within. To come in contact with that greater body that I know as God, Spirit, the divine. I turn within and I trust the goodness of that one essence. That is calling forth clarity and peace and harmony. I turn within and I allow myself to feel the joy of that divine essence, to feel the peace that is at the core of all things. I allow balance in my personal life as I stay in the fulcrum of the divine. And I trust the balance of the world at this moment and the balance of goodness. Good and more good is all around us, surrounding us. And I make the choice to recognize it, to see it, and to celebrate it. And so, from that place of faith and trust, I call forth for each one of us the vigor and the vitality and the amazing mechanics of our lives. The mechanics of the universe, which is orderly, which is loving, which is peaceful. And I call it all good because it is all God. So I get out of the way. I allow God to move in perfection through me, around me, and I trust that and celebrate it, and I claim it for each one of us by saying, and so it is.